This week, members of many left-of-center political parties from different parts of the world are meeting in Manila for a global conference of the so-called Progressive Alliance. One of the key questions the participants seek to answer is, what is the role of progressive political parties in democratic deepening? But that assumes a prior question. What is the role of political parties? What are they good for anyway? Hello, I'm John Nery and you are in the Public Square. The conference started with an overview of the political history of Southeast Asia with the renowned political scientist Dr. Gilbert Quimpo tracing the three waves of democratization and the three waves of autocratization in the region. I am delighted to say that Dr. Quimpo, a professor at the University of Tsukuba in Japan, joins us today. Also joining us, I'm happy to say, is a convener of the conference herself, Sondang Tampubolon of Indonesia, the regional coordinator of SocDem Asia Pacific. They are both in the Manila Hotel and are joining us via Zoom. Welcome, Dr. Quimpo and Ma'am Sondang, and thank you for joining us in the Public Square.
Good afternoon.
Let me start with the general question. So first for Dr. Quimpo and then for Ma'am Sondang. Are political parties good for democracy?
Oh, certainly. I mean, they are means for articulating, clarifying positions on various issues. They're also good for, gathering together people with similar views or ideology or ideological thinking. And they provide organization for people who would like to engage in politics, okay, and help people formulate a program of action, put together, your different views and come up with something more organized. So yes, I think political parties are very important. But of course, I'll have to make a distinction about political parties in the Philippines because they do not really conform to what a political party should be, okay? I mean, you should have a program or an ideology, and the parties that you find in the Philippines don't really have a political party or an ideology. They're actually much more vehicles of political patronage by powerful forces, especially powerful political families and clans. Okay, and it's a catch-all arrangement. If you have some attraction in you, I mean, you can attract people, whether you're a movie star, a basketball player, or somebody who speaks articulately. You're welcome, as long as you can get the votes. And then you come up with in the course of the campaign, you come up with all sorts of very nice things. Motherhood statements and all that. Motherhood statements, that's what Conrad de Quiros was saying about political parties in the Philippines. Okay, but all these motherhood statements, okay, are just sort of thrown away after election because those who win will just sort of transfer to the ruling coalition and forget about the party in which they made all those motherhood statements.
Thank you, Doc. Sondang, would you agree that political parties, ideally understood, are good for democracy, but you also need to make a distinction between ideal political parties and those, perhaps, do you have examples of those in Indonesia or maybe elsewhere in Asia Pacific?
Well, political parties is actually one of the vehicle for the democracy itself. Because it should be the manifest of what people wanted. It should not be only for a certain community. It should be for all the people. That should be the role of the political party. So it's always should be reflect of what is the voters wanted. And we are actually being in the government, in the opposition, is always for fight for all the people needs. It should be for the people through the democracy. So it should not be for the vehicle for one community to get in power in a position.
Dr. Quimpo, what about the examples of political parties like Putin's United Russia Party, for instance, or what's happening to the Republican Party in the United States? How should we understand these parties that may actually pose a threat to democracy?
Okay. In certain countries, the most common form of political regime nowadays, according to quite a number of political scientists, are electoral authoritarian regimes or electoral autocracies, where you have elections which are not really free and fair. Sometimes they might be competitive to a certain extent, but the playing field is not level. Okay, in some of these cases, the elections are actually a facade for for a regime that is actually, in essence, autocratic. So yeah, you have this phenomenon now, and sometimes it's a situation where, say, for example, in countries like Thailand, okay, or Myanmar, where you had, say, a democratically elected regime, and then they were overthrown by a coup, and then the coup leaders now would like to move from being a closed democracy, a closed autocracy, say, for example, a military regime, into something like an electoral autocracy. Okay, so that's where Thailand is moving now, and then where, say, Myanmar would also like to go into, but they're having difficulty at the moment. And then you have a situation where, like, for example, in Singapore, where the authoritarian thinking or autocratic type of leader starts off with, winning elections, winning power through democratic elections. And then slowly democracy is eroded until such time that, the opposition cannot really win anymore. And the party in power, or the autocratic power, stays very long in power, and it's very difficult to dislodge them. Okay, and so from the time that say the PAP in Singapore got into power, that was upon independence. It's still the same party that's still in power now. They've been having elections every 4 or 5 years, and it's always the let's say, the People's Action Party that wins. So those are several types of this so-called electoral autocracy or electoral authoritarianism. Now, the thing there is that, in the view, for example, of the Varieties of Democracy Institute, the Philippines has drifted actually into electoral authoritarianism. I'm not quite convinced that that is how the Philippines should be. But there's that thinking that actually the Philippines is already an electoral autocracy.
Sondang, you heard Dr. Quimpo talk about the Philippine experience with political parties. And also, I think I heard someone say in the conference today that there are over 200 political parties in the Philippines. Are there that many parties in Indonesia, or in your regional coordinator for SocDem Asia and the Pacific, in other areas that you cover?
Okay, so for the Philippines, it's really confusing system, electorate system. And that's why they allowed 200 more political parties. In Indonesia, you cannot do that because first, we have a certain system and law in regards to the electorate. So, for the legislative election and also presidential election, for the legislative election, the contestant is not the person, but it's the political party. The political party should meet also certain percentage for them in order to support for a president candidate. So, whoever can be a contestant to the election in Indonesia, but at the end, they should meet 4% legislative parliament threshold for them, in order for them to be seated in a national parliament level. And after that, only 20% of the political party could support for a president candidacy. That's by the law. So, and then for the political party, which is very new, established in Indonesia, they could allow to go with the election only until 2 years of the establishment. And they have to be also a branch in 100% in all over Indonesia. So it cannot be only one political party just established, have only 2 branches in Indonesia, can go with the election, cannot. So we have that certain particular law. And I believe also in the Malaysia, it's the same with Indonesia, and also in Thailand. So it cannot be more than, I think it's very difficult for more than 20 political parties can enroll in every election, because they have to meet certain requirement first before they go for the election.
But even with that kind of system, Sondang, I fear that Indonesia is veering slowly or quickly away from a more democratic regime. What explains that?
Okay, so first we are discussing about how to make a very good term, or how to make a very good election system in the country. That we already have.
Okay.
The second is how to filter the people who will be in power.
Okay.
And the political party role. So they have to be very careful to appoint someone or to endorse someone as the leader of the country. We have managed to make President Joko Widodo to be our president in Indonesia. Many people said in the first term he's okay, but in the second term he's not that okay, especially now when he promoting his family to become the...
Yes, his son is the incoming vice president, yes.
Yes, and also his another son will be the running for a governor, and in-law also for the government. So even with the good system, we cannot avoid that because they meet the requirement. So what we can do is how to tackle for them in order them to only make a policy or regulation in regards for the people only. Because sometimes we thought that he's the son of the vice president, he cannot do anything. But you know, in a way, a lot of people is proving the other way. A lot of people see like maybe Bongbong, he's not that bad.
Okay, we're starting from a very low bar. Yes.
So the dynasty is not all about the dynasty is bad. So we can just figure out how to filter only certain people can be a ruling party or part, and we can still control the debt or the potential damage that he can do.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Quimpo, you started the entire conference with a presentation of a survey of the political history of Southeast Asia. And you spoke of the waves of democratization and then autocratization. Can we talk about the third wave of autocratization? Some scholars say it started in the 2000s, but you also mentioned or referenced a couple of scholars who say it probably started in 1994. My question is, and I think you already touched on this a little earlier, what is the difference between the third wave of autocratization, which we are living in now, from the first 2 waves?
Well, in the first 2 waves of autocratization, these were marked by illegal power grabs, okay? In the nature of, for example, coup d'etat or martial law, state of emergency, or even a foreign invasion. Okay, so these were the ways. So it's quite clear. Legally elected government is in place, and then suddenly it's gone, and you now have a dictator or a junta in place. Okay, and so there's a clear-cut, say, division. But the more common trend now in this third wave of autocratization is that the main means of getting to power is through democratic erosion. Okay, and that is, okay, you start out with elections. Okay, a party gets into power, but then in the subsequent elections, okay, things are sort of done in such a way that the elections are already more in favor, or set up in favor of the ruling party. Okay, and that has happened in so many countries, and that is in fact sort of the more common practice now in many parts of the world. Now, Singapore and Malaysia were the ones who sort of pioneered in that in Southeast Asia. Okay, and then the other thing is that sometimes, this electoral authoritarianism or electoral autocracies that are set up, as I said earlier, it can be done gradually, but then others would do it, like, for example, in the case of Thailand, you have a coup d'etat, and then you try to set up an electoral authoritarian system so that it doesn't seem to be, I mean, of course, when you have an out-and-out dictatorship, then it suffers from legitimacy, and it becomes very vulnerable to, say, popular uprising. But if you shift to electoral autocracy, as what Thailand is trying to do now, then maybe you can still hold on to power.
So if I understand you correctly, the first two waves, essentially we're talking about a democratic collapse. And the third wave of autocratization is democratic erosion. So in the Philippine example, in 1972, Marcos, shut down Congress, closed down the newspapers and so on. But under Duterte, he just engineered the removal of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, found a way for Congress to continue.
Crack down on the dissenters.
Impose martial law in Mindanao.
Jail, and crack down on media, things of the sort, okay?
Sondang, I'd like to ask you, so we're talking here of maybe the last 20 years or so, this third wave of autocratization, and maybe 2016 is a milestone for this, not because of the rise of Trump, but before that, the rise of Duterte. How has this third wave of autocratization affected progressive parties in the region that you cover?
Yeah, in Southeast Asia or Asia Pacific, at the moment, I think we are also finally can taste the effect of this authoritarian. Because, nowadays, many political parties will be saying to the people that we are social democracy. But the way they did it's not reflecting it. So it's making confusing to the voters. Then they be elected, and then ask the one who struggle every time, being the progressive movement, not getting the trust from the people. And I think it's now more difficult also for us because the challenge is more there. But then the result of for example, the result of the Indian election, it's still the far right is still winning, but he can beat him more, so he cannot be solely in coalition. But different story in Nepal. There's no idealism there. even though that they're saying communism, but they're not really communist. It's all about the power. How can they get into power? So it's about the negotiation between the political party who is winning. So this kind of struggle is what we are having now in Asia and Pacific. So that's why we are seek help from everybody, even the researcher like Prof. Nathan, to guide us. How can we how can we react, and how can we perform well as a politician to bring about this progressive movement and also the social democracy principles into our daily activities, and how can we make a policy that is reflect on our, what is our principle. So it's a very big challenge for us because we are facing this, especially for the the fake news everywhere in social media. So it's more challenging for us.
Thank you, Sondang. Dr. Quimpo, your lecture, your opening lecture, found that almost all Southeast Asian countries have been ruled by authoritarian regimes through most of their sovereign or independent years, right? So that's like the fundamental experience, and now we have the third wave. What led to the third wave, and what role did Sondang talked about social media, for instance. Did internet and computer technology play a role in accelerating the advent of the third wave of autocratization?
In a way, yes, you could say that media and the internet did play a role. Okay, especially since authoritarian-minded leaders were able to sort of make use of these particular instruments. Okay, and just to go back a bit to what you earlier said about the authoritarian experience. So 9 out of the 11 countries in Southeast Asia have been under authoritarian rule for most of their sovereign years. The only 2 exceptions actually to that are the Philippines and Timor-Leste. Okay? All the others experience more years of authoritarian rule, being under authoritarian rule. Okay, so going back now to this point about the internet and the media, okay, the thing is that internet, media, social media, okay, this can be actually instruments, or they can be technologies of repression and disinformation, okay. But other scholars are saying that you can also sort of turn this into technologies of liberation. Okay, so yeah, that's the thing there. Whether they become instruments of repression and disinformation, versus say the instruments of liberation, and they were turned into technologies of liberation. For example, during the Arab Spring. But of course, we know what happened afterwards in the Arab Spring. The countries that did get liberated were only there liberated for a while. But nonetheless, you already have this experience where the ones who were pushing for democracy, okay, pushing for democratization, were able to sort of maximize their use. Okay, at the moment, yeah, you have quite a number of countries where authoritarians are sort of controlling media, internet, social media, and they use very sophisticated methods. But I'm sort of confident that in time, okay, those who are really pushing also for democracy will be able to devise means to turn these technologies of repression and disinformation into technologies of liberation.
I'm sorry to have to ask a question specifically about the Philippines again, although I am mindful that much of our audience is a Philippine audience. Dr. Quimpo, I'd like to ask, did the third wave of democratization in the Philippines, symbolized by EDSA in 1986, lead inevitably to the third wave of autocratization?
Well, it was not really inevitable, but there were already conditions that were set way back in 1986, because of course there was a democratic restoration, but then as some have observed, it was sort of a return of the oligarchs. Others would put it as elite restoration, okay, in the sense that it's again the system of elite rule, elite democracy, or cacique democracy, as some scholars have. And so this was in place. So you have oligarchic rule very much in place, entrenched, and has sort of in a way it has worsened, okay, to the point now that you have, well, some would say a duopoly, okay, where you have the two biggest or the most powerful dynasties in power, okay. You have the Marcos family and the Duterte family, and yeah, I mean it's sort of okay now they're contending with each other, but yeah, it has reached that point, okay. Now this trend about dynastic rule is not only sort of happening in the Philippines, but it's also in a way spreading in Southeast Asia. Okay, you see it in Indonesia, where you have the son-in-law of Suharto and the son of the outgoing president, now holding the top two positions in the country. In the case of Singapore, the Lee Kuan Yew family. So there was an interim period where there was an ally, and then for a time now it has been for some time it became the son, okay, of Lee Kuan Yew. Then now in the case of Cambodia, okay, the mantle has been passed on by Hun Sen to his son. The prime ministership has been passed on to his son after the elections last year, okay. And then, of course, we all know about the Thaksin Shinawatra passing on in a way the prime ministership was passed on in a sense to Yingluck, okay, and now another Shinawatra is playing a key role in the political party. So yeah, you have all these developments in Southeast Asia. This dynastic politics is sort of infectious in Southeast Asia. Anyway, okay.
But even so my next question is for Sondang. Even in the midst of this third wave of autocratization, as Sondang, as you yourself pointed out, there have been some unusual signs. So, for instance, the unexpected, stunning results of the Indian elections, right? Can you talk more about other success stories? Even in spite of the third wave of autocratization, what can we point to? What are successful examples of progressive political parties winning office or passing important or even historic initiatives?
Yeah, I think we can go look through the Australian. Because the Australian now is the progressive party, is the one who is in the ruling government, and they can beat the last political party, and now I think they are really form a new style of a government, and then it's more to the what people wanted, like they're giving discount for the tax. They are more listening to the people now. I think it's a lesson learned after they lost from the previous election. But for the Malaysia, it's different because although winning, they are being forced to be in a coalition with someone who is the authoritarian before. So that's they are being forced. So we are hoping that the DAP can giving more color. It's not the other way around. And but for the Indonesian, and the last election, we lost the presidential election, but we gained more seats in the parliament. And although the president elected asking our party to be on board as the government in the government, but we said no, we will support the government good policies for good for the people after the COVID, but we will be but we will not be sitting in the government because it's an inconsistency for the voters also. And another, I think the only examples is in the Australia, because in Malaysia, I don't think it's we can put it at a good samples there.
Thank you. Let me build on that question about success stories and ask Dr. Quimpo, Professor, do you see any signs of a fourth wave of democratization?
Well, I think eventually it will get to that, but personally, I think that things will may even sort of worsen in a few years, okay, in the coming years. But yeah, I'm quite sure that, the third wave of autocratization will be give rise eventually to a fourth wave of democratization. Okay, I think how long this wave of autocratization will persist, I think that the U.S. elections will play a significant role in this. Okay, but yes, the countries in Southeast Asia will really have to face up to this situation where autocratization rather than democratization will sort of deepen up for a while, and then you will be seeing popular upheavals, democratic upheavals again.
Thank you. One last question, if you please. No, I'll direct it first to Sondang and then to Professor Quimpo. So the entire conference is about progressive political parties and their role in democratic deepening. So what can progressive parties do to help deepen democracy?
In some of the countries in Asia, we are now falling down. The more progressive parties is now more sinking, not getting attention from the voters. We don't get more solid voters, putting us into majority government. So, of course, yeah, we are worried about the maybe future situation. So that's why we are start to criticize ourselves.
Okay.
What we have done in the past that come to this end now. So that's why we are come to a solution. Okay, we research, we ask professor, we ask think tank, we get with all the input, and then after that we will formalize one module for all of us to follow. So then it will be more better political parties in all the SocDem Asia Pacific as a member in the region. So that's the thing that we are trying to do. So it's not only about talking about the women issue that they should be in the leadership, but the whole thing is about the democracy, because as we are mentioned before, for example, in Indonesia, are there still democracy there? Maybe dying. So how about in Thailand? They keep on following the election, but they cannot win and keep on dissolve. This is for almost the second times. And in Burmese also, they win, but they're not ruling. They're not even entering the parliament house. And that's happening also in another countries with different problems, but it's almost similar. So that's why I think, because we are always gather, we always have a gathering, so we communicate each other how we can tackle this. So then we come to a conclusion. We need other people. We need journalists. We need all the researchers. We need all the think tank to feed us. How can we perform better as a political parties and as a politician?
Thank you. That was one of my takeaways from this morning's session at the conference. There's a need to cross all sorts of borders, right? Political borders, sectoral borders, and so on, and work together in solidarity. Professor Quimpo?
Okay. Well, I think that progressive parties will be playing a very big role in terms of not just restoring democracy, but also in deepening democracy. Now, of course, the first in this situation of a third wave of autocratization, there's a very great need for pushing for the restoration of democracy, okay, and bring back, the dimensions of democracy, such as competition, participation, civil and political liberties, okay. But then another thing that we have to take into consideration is that the framework, especially of progressives, is that you're not limited to the liberal democratic framework. After all, if you look at the French Revolution experience, the push has always been for liberté, égalité, and fraternité. Okay, so it's equality and fraternity. Okay, so you're looking, for example, in terms, say, for example, equality, moving towards, say, a greater equality, not just in terms of socioeconomic, but also in the treatment of different ethnic communities and nationalities within a certain country. Also equality in terms of, say, men and women and LGBT, for example. Okay. Then you try to move closer to a welfare type of state where the poor are able to access education, health, etc. Okay. Then also the greater dimension of broader dimensions of participation, not just limited, for example, to participation in elections. Okay. But participation in various decision-making processes too. Okay. Then also the question of expansion of human rights, rather than just focusing on individuals' liberties, rights. Okay, which is actually the first dimension or first level. There's a second and the third level. The second, which focuses also on economic and social rights, which are also still part of the international Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And now we're also going into the third dimension, which are solidarity rights. Okay, and so I think, which includes the right to development, okay, the right of indigenous peoples and all that. Anyway, so there are ways really for deepening democracy. So it's not just a question of trying to recover liberal democracy and all that, but even trying to broaden and deepen the democracy. But at the moment, of course, the big challenge is, for many countries in the region, restoration of democracy. Okay. Yes.
And on that note, thank you very much, Madam Sondang Tampubolon of SocDem Asia Pacific and Professor Nathan Gilbert Quimpo of the University of Tsakuba. This has been an instructive, sobering, context-widening conversation. Thank you. And that's it for us today. The next step for engaged citizens, as always, is to take a more active part in rebuilding our democracy. Download the Rappler Communities app to join the chat room of your choice. Thank you. This is John Nery. See you in the public square.